All right, we'll go ahead and call to order the work session for August 14th of the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners. We have two items for discussion today. We're going to flip-flop them. Intelligent Growth, since Mr. Platte from the Union County Economic Development Organization is here, and then we're going to talk about core infrastructure and services. So, Chris Platte, take it away.
How's everyone?
Good.
Apologize, I have not been introduced to everybody. So again, Chris Platte, just to give you a little history. As you can tell by the orange, I'm a psychotic Clemson graduate. But been in Union County since 1999. Originally came from South Carolina. Worked in York County and Chester County. Started their program in Chester and then came up here. So I'm starting my 20th year in Union County doing economic development. So I'm very happy. Live right around the corner in Hunter Oaks, so consider Waxhaw my hometown. So I want to go through a little here. Steve asked me to come and talk about sort of a study that we had done about a year and a half ago with Wingate University to look at the balance of industrial and residential in our county and demonstrate the value of manufacturing and what that does. As we, are highly the residential is a significant part of the tax base for Union County, so we want to kind of show the difference and what that means. So we're going to go through some of that and also drill down a little bit more in the Waxhaw situation. So as you go forward here, you've got hard copies in front of you as well. But just some background, again, Monroe Union County formed in 2013. There were two entities. City of Monroe had their organization, which started in '95 with the development of the Monroe Corporate Center. Union County has had various versions of economic development, be it from the chamber to a private entity to a full public entity to a public-private entity, several forms, and now it's in an interlocal agreement between the City of Monroe and Union County. So we provide these services countywide, and the objective is, as you can see here, is to improve the overall quality of life for every resident through targeted recruitment. So we're very specific on who we go after, and the retention and expansion. So really everything in our office starts with taking care of who's here first and making sure that those companies can succeed, and then we put out a lot of marketing trying to promote our community to the industry leaders, to commercial realtors, site selectors, anyone that may be a source of a project to us. And so the result of that is hopefully to balance the tax burden so that the residents don't have as much of a burden on them to provide all the services, and then provide career opportunities for our residents. Like to think I'm a business person trapped in government, so look at things on a fiscal basis, ROI. We look at everything as a business does. And so with the joint, the combination of the two EDCs, we were able to save so far today $2.4 million in wasted admin costs between having two entities. Since 2013, again, we've generated over $500 million of new tax base in Union County, lured 1,700 jobs, which has generated $68 million of additional annual salary in this county that just churns. And so the actual, there's rough numbers about 1 to 4, 1 to 3 is how many times a dollar will turn in the community, so you can just see what that multiplier becomes. And as a result, too, we've actually reduced the unemployment 60% since 2013. And we've done that while at the same time having this influx of people moving into the county, so the labor force has actually increased 16.3% over that same time period. So I feel very happy with that. What is the driving factor of this? Driving document that we have is our work plan. It has an area of focus with 4 legs, that being precision manufacturing, agribusiness, logistics, and commercial. If you look at this, precision manufacturing and logistics are traditional economic development areas. If you look at agribusiness and commercial, they're non-traditional. So it's easy to find a large box, put a company in it that will distribute, find a box and put companies in there that will manufacture. That's very simple, traditional economic development. The agribusiness is a little bit more creative, and commercial is more in the office side. The problem with commercial locally is it's harder to incentivize, so that's why it's a little bit out of the tradition of us. If you look across the top, though, the precision manufacturing and agribusiness are based on skills. You're not going to be, so when we talk about agribusiness, it is not farming. It is basically the things that help with farming. So if we would have a company that would make an implement to go on the back of a tractor, a trailer manufacturer, Tyson Foods, food processing, that's the agribusiness that we're talking about. So those are skill-based. You know, you have to have someone that can, you know, produce that implement that goes on the back of the trailer. The guy that can make the part that's, you know, for an aerospace product. If you look at the logistics and the commercial side, those are location-based. You're not going to put a logistics operation in Marlboro, South Carolina. You know, it's just, there's not enough there road-wise to get you in and out. Those are going to typically target industrial or interstate corridors or larger road systems. Commercial, the same thing. They're going to be closer to an urban center. So those are location-based. So as you look at Union County, we've further delineated those four areas of focus into the target sectors. It's a little bit hard to read, and I apologize about that, but we can get you a copy of the work plan. It's a little bit easier. And then, so between breaking up those four areas of focus, we also look at the county. Union County is as diverse as any state. So, you know, they talk about Manio, Murphy to Manio in North Carolina. We talk about Marvin to Marshville. I mean, you don't get much different than that spread. And so we really look at the west, it's sort of the, you know, the western edge next to Mecklenburg County. We look at the industrialized center, and then we have that agri-crescent that sits out to the east. So in that western area, Waxhaw, the competitive advantage really falls within the precision manufacturing and the commercial, is what we've seen through our lens. And so those are some areas that we think have the highest competitive advantage, and we can go through further details on that at a later date if you'd like. So as we look at Union County, particularly at this industrial, commercial versus residential mix, just kind of want to show you some facts to sort of get everything, sort of lay the groundwork here. Union County's population, about 240,000 people now. Unemployment just had a recent blip up to 3.7 from 3.2%. But our labor force continues to grow as people are coming back into the labor force, thanks to the economy. The growth rate, you can see, again, since 2000, 87%. The growth rate since 1990, almost 180%. No county around Mecklenburg comes close to that. We have about 40 to 50,000 commuters that go into Mecklenburg County per day from this county. And I would assume about a third of that comes from this area. And so if you look at that and the pressures on our system here, a lot of that is those people going into Mecklenburg County to work. Student population around 42,000, household income 66,000, substantially higher than the state, and that has grown 30% since 2000. So again, a substantial growth rate in our household income, in everything, and people would be just killing each other to have these kind of stats. The hourly manufacturing wage has grown nearly 100% since I started here, particularly because of the aerospace manufacturing that we put in. So today, when I started, it was around $9 to $10 an hour. Today, it's 18.5 for manufacturing as an average. So you're seeing people, welders, making $80,000 to $100,000 a year. I mean, it's a career now. It is not a job. Yes, sir.
So on your previous chart, areas of focus, is it fair to say that those four areas are part of a bigger analysis of the whole region? This is where we excel versus the other counties around the Mecklenburg area.
Correct. So if you look at that percentage as you go around, others would have similar, they deviate from that a little bit, particularly as you get into Mecklenburg County, but the percentages will be off from what we have. So logistics to us, because we don't have a substantial road system in the county until the expressway comes online, logistics is a much smaller component of what we have. So manufacturing is our baby. That's the big one. And then the next in line is agribusiness, logistics, and then commercial's the smallest, because again, there's not been a lot of zoning right along that boundary with Weddington and Stallings, you know, sort of putting in the right zoning to attract some of those manufacturing the way Fort Mill, Belmont, and other places have done, Cornelius. So that's why our percentages are highly on the manufacturing side. Does that answer? And again, please interrupt. I'm not big on presentations. I much prefer conversations. So we can talk about a lot of this. But as we go through, local economies thrive in the long term due to balance, and this is one of the big things. I'm a sailing freak, so I love America's Cup, things like that. And as you look at a sailboat is a great analogy of sort of where things lie, the way they should. In the textbook world, you would have about 60% of your tax base residential, 40% industrial commercial, or non-residential. And so sort of like a sail. It's pushed over by the wind, and that keel is the manufacturing base, the commercial base that keeps it from flipping over. Waxhaw is 93%, 7. So it's a significant change. And a couple years ago, we looked at this number, and it was around 92. So it's actually increased in the residential side for Waxhaw in the last couple years. And again, that's based on value. So it's not per home, it's a value of your overall tax base. The residential investment is key in a lot of ways. So this is not we're not poo-pooing the development of residential in the sense that they do provide the workforce, they provide what is necessary for retail to grow, they provide a lot of support for your education network, whether that's the K through 12, South Piedmont, Wingate University, all of that requires that residential growth. The big thing, though, is it has to be balanced. It cannot be so focused on residential. So the balanced development in this high-value tax base is essential. And so looking at that, it is a challenge because we have 15 different governmental units. And so this study is looking at it from a county perspective. And so everybody has their own needs and their own desires at a local level. And so with all those different governmental units, it's hard to align everybody to really focus on the commercial development. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is get this message out that as we start to look at your town, Fred and I were on the comprehensive plan committee together a couple years ago, and that was one of my big pushes in that meeting. In those meetings was just you've got to have some of that commercial base to pay for all the things that the town wants. And so we're out there pitching this idea. So just making people aware. Residential development, while it is necessary, does have demands. And residential in itself is going to require more resources than it generates. So it has a lot of demand on services, and those services have ongoing costs. So it's not, once you build a library, you still have lights to go on and air conditioning, and so there's services that go on after the fact, after the debt service is paid off of the facility. So the cost to serve is extreme. The differential is pretty extreme between your commercial industrial versus residential and other uses. So, and that's from schools. And again, we're looking at this from a county perspective here. Public safety, schools, libraries, parks, whatever. Those are very expensive things to maintain. So the balance there is critical in your planning so that you have something to help pay for those. Because we all want those. We always want those to be the best, but they have to be paid for. And the burden on residential is just hard over time. So without that balance, you do see taxes increasing. You see that in places like Detroit. You see it, and that's an extreme example, but where services have to be cut because there's less to spread the cost over. And so all citizens begin to suffer. People with means will leave. And that's one of the biggest fears, is then you have a brain drain. You have other things that kind of go away. And then children that are born here don't have the opportunity to come back and be employed, so they go somewhere else. And so they don't come back. We send them to college, and then they go Atlanta, Charlotte, Raleigh, wherever. So without balance, as you can tell here, you don't want to be on that boat. And so it can change pretty quickly. So in 2016, the Board of Advisors, my Board of Advisors, commissioned Wingate University to do the analysis of the industrial base. And the findings were not surprising except in the extremes. So while we knew that this was, the results were going to be about where we saw, we were shocked at some of the disparity of the number. And so first was the county's 83% residential, so not far from Waxhaw, 13% industrial commercial, 4% agribusiness. So that alone is a little scary as you look at it. The nice thing with Union County compared to, say, that if this was another county that was more rural, The residential value is so high that that helps offset. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a 60-40. So we're not looking for that necessarily the textbook number for Union County, but it's still in a kind of a spooky spot. So kind of looking at that in the pie chart again, this is what it consumes. The residential consumes 93% of the ad valorem tax that's generated. So it produces 83% of the tax revenue, consumes 93% of it. Industrial commercial generates 13%, it only consumes 6%. Agribusiness is 4%, produces 1%. The problem is it's such a small component, it doesn't really move the needle. So the two big ones are the ones that we're going to focus on. So when you look at that for the 2015 fiscal year, which is the complete, when we did the study, that was the complete data that came out of the CAFR, this was the result. The residential tax base cost Union County $14.4 million. That's what they lost from a business-minded focus. They lost $14.4 million. On the 13% tax base, they made, which is the industrial commercial, they made 28.7%, $28.7 million. So that differential is what it's supposed to happen in the 60-40. You know, we anticipate residential not covering all of its costs, so it's always going to have a loss. We're expecting that. The loss was pretty significant. And so thank goodness the industrial was able to offset that.
Can I ask you, is it possible to get a copy of that full report?
Yes, absolutely. It's on our website, but I can definitely get you a hard copy too.
Thank you so much. I'd love to read that.
Absolutely. It is a little wonky. I'm an economist, so it's not necessarily the most enjoyable reading at times, but it's pretty interesting.
Would you send it to Melody so she
Yes,
can
yeah, give it to everybody, absolutely. And so what I'll do is I'll give you a Dropbox link that you can get, because it's a fairly large file electronically, and then send hard copies. The average value of the home in Union County at the time, so again, this is all, put the asterisk on it, about 2015, was $265,000, which is good. That's a great number. You know, you look at certain other counties, it's $160,000, $180,000. So that becomes much more dramatic. If you have 83% and you're only $180,000 a house, you are really consuming a lot of things. So that number's going to be out of whack pretty bad. And the county's going to have really high tax value. And again, where I came from in Chester County before coming to Union, it was almost double what York County was because of the situation they had. So just did not have enough entities to spread that tax burden across. So as a result of that differential that we showed, the $14.7 million loss to the $28 million gain, basically every house in Union County is subsidized nearly $500. So if it wasn't for the industrial tax base, the commercial tax base, so every grocery store, every industry we have, every retail shop, if it wasn't for all of that, our taxes would be substantially different. As in, at the time, it was a 66 cents tax rate of the county. The tax rate would have, to offset, if we did not have that industrial tax base, the tax rate would have been 94 cents. So, a huge increase. So, again, we can all be thankful that our taxes are so much lower because of that industrial tax base. It'd be nice if we could offset it even more and sort of get a little bit more parity there, so that we can keep the tax, because again, the demands are not going to stop. The demands are going to keep coming. Insurance doesn't get any cheaper. You know, there's always demands on services that you're going to have to pay for. So we've got to continue to grow, continue to put in industrial base throughout the county. So if you look at the break-even value, if the industrial didn't exist and the residential had to pay for itself, so that there was just a push on the tax rate, there's a differential of about $62,000. So $327,000 would have to be the break-even value in Union County. $60,000 a house doesn't sound that bad until you put it into, you're looking at a substantial number of housing units. Basically, the next 5,000 homes to move that weighted average up have to average $1.1 million. The next 5,000 homes would have to be 1.1 million. So that is such a, oh my gosh, number that you understand why we have to have those industries to help bring that and keep us in a good situation. So, and please understand, we understand that there's differences between parts of the county. So when I say industry, I mean whatever's specific for Waxhaw. So it's not, industrial commercial to me is sort of an interchangeable term. So we talk about it. So please don't think that I'm talking smokestacks when we talk about just for Waxhaw. We're talking about what are the things that Waxhaw is competitive at and what would be good here to bring in the type of jobs that we want. So as the county looks at its land use plan and everything else, basically for every 2 acres of residential, they need to offset that with 1 acre of industrial. So that's how we're going to kind of change that number a little bit. And so it's not that this has to be zoned right away. It's just that the understanding that there's going to have to be some offset to protect land, because the demand and the speed of residential development is so much faster than industrial. So it has to be sort of put the moats around some of these pieces.
Given this was done after, the study was done after Union County did their comprehensive plan, has the Board of County Commissioners talked at all about slight modifications to their comprehensive plan or adjustments to compensate for economic development?
They look at every rezoning and everything with this in mind.
Okay.
So they're definitely aware of this. They've heard me preach this a ton. So it's top of mind with them. So there's a lot of questions related to this. Usually behind closed doors, other things with staff before it kind of matriculates up. So again, what I want to say is residential development is not bad. I'm not trying to just have the Home Builders Association come and burn me out of my home, but it's not that. It's that residential only as a model is not good, and it's basically a pyramid scheme. You to maintain it at a municipal level, and again, coming from, I've got many years at a municipal level, so I understand this. You've got to continue to feed underneath the pyramid to keep it together. Otherwise, it starts to fall down. And so eventually the problem is if you're just focused on residential growth, you're going to run out of housing, out of land. And so that's your one, they're not making any more of it. And so when you start to run out of that, you only have those homes to spread your tax base over. And again, everything else is increasing. You only get to really modify your residential tax base every 8 years with a revow. And so once it's filled, you're not seeing really increases but every 8 years, but all your other costs are increasing every year. So you need to make sure that, again, there's the nice thing about commercial industrial is it's appraised every year. There's always new equipment that's being looked at, so it's constantly seeing an uptick outside of depreciation on equipment. Yes, sir.
What part or parts of the residential services seem to be driving the disparity between revenue and cost? Is it just across the board? Is it police department? Is it schools?
I would say typically at a county level, the biggest nut that you're sort of having to deal with is the schools. That's your largest cost. At a local level, it can be public safety and sort of parks and rec. Those are your 2 biggies. All your other services either have fees to kind of offset. So I know, fire's a big one. Their equipment is so expensive.
But they have a separate tax.
They have a separate tax, but it's still part of your burden.
Yeah.
That goes up if.
Believe me, I know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So it's part of all of our burden. I mean, I'm paying it too. So, so when you look at that, each governmental entity has its own. So you have to look at each one to see where its demands are. And so, not to point out any particular community, but certain ones that will put in like a large regional park. So if you look at like Rock Hill, they've got Cherry Park, they've got Manchester Meadows, they've got some other things that they generate revenue, but it's also cost. They have to have a ton of staff. They have to go out and market. They have to go buy these tournaments to come in. So, those things get really interesting. And so while it looks like a good idea at first, and it's fairly affordable on the debt service, it's the long-term stuff. So you have to really do a lot of analysis to see where your pressure points are. Everybody's different.
So maybe ask that question a different way. So if cost to serve for residential is 1, what fraction of that typically is for commercial?
Let me get through a little bit further, and I can maybe answer that.
Okay, all right.
So, again, land is your finite resource, and so it is also is where you generate most of your revenue from. So it's that property tax. Obviously, you have sales tax, franchise taxes, other taxes, fees that come in, but it's the property tax that really makes a difference. And so it's the one thing you control. It's the one thing you can help modify, and influence the value that sits on that land. And so it's just something to think about as you're looking at the future land uses that are going to go out there, that while you still need to continue to grow your residential, you've got to put in some commercial tax base. So in Waxhaw's condition, we've talked about that for a second, 93% tax revenue is residential, 7% industrial commercial. Most of that really lies in a few pockets. It's basically the Lowe's, Curitan area, and downtown, and that's probably about it. That's, again, not in our, looking at it long-term, that's not the healthiest strategy. So we need to find a way to move that. Your average home is great. I mean, your average home is sitting there between probably, again, I'm trying to look at some numbers very high level here. We haven't dialed in with Greg and everybody, but high level, it's around 280 to 320 probably is your average home right now, so that's great. So you have some room to work with that. And so we just need to make sure that we do a good examination of what it is the costs are, as you were just asking, first cost to serve those properties versus the cost to serve our industrial, commercial properties that you have, and then those revenues that are coming in.
And just from the 2016 census, which is the latest data we got, or the 2017, the median is 273, so you're right there.
Okay.
You're right there.
And so that's got it, and the ones that are coming in right now are higher than this.
Correct,
So.
yeah.
One more question, Chris. Would it make more sense to look at the balance from county level rather than from a Waxhaw or a Weddington or a Marvin level? I can see areas in the county that are really significantly attractive to precision engineering. Deer Park.
Sure.
Along 74, along the bypass as it comes in.
Yeah.
And will Waxhaw ever be a precision engineering place? I don't know.
That's where, I think if you look at where Waxhaw's strong, I mean, you've got kind of mirror parts of Charlotte or parts of other places. I think software development, any IT, because of the downtown, because of the, it's a very creative market, environment that you can be in. So I think that's a very strong component. That brings engineering talent. There's other things that kind of come with that. So you're more in the office. And if you are manufacturing, which I think you are, it is going to be stuff that goes out on a bread truck that is highly valuable. So it's smaller pieces that have a lot of precision to make, sort of like a medical component, something that maybe go in your body, things like that would come out of here. But it's going to take, there's people in white coats making it, not sort of, not a biofuel.
About very clean industries
Oh,
that
yes.
have very little impact on the outside as far as.
Correct. Yeah, you're going to see a building,
Yeah.
and you're going to see cars outside of it. It's going to look, really no different than
Or
Emmett's.
office building.
Yeah,
Okay.
So, and that's where, you have that competitive advantage to that draw. You've got a lot of talent right here that's driving to those buildings now that could just not
Yeah.
drive there. So it's, people would be dying to have the resources that I have in this county with places like Waxhaw to sell. We just need to get the land and the places built to bring those here. So again, and this is part of the problem. If you don't have if you have too much of the residential, which we see right now, that what I was talking about, that 1/3 of the 50,000 that's going out of the county, is because you don't have any daytime population. Everybody's gone. So your pressures on your transportation system sit at 8 a.m. with either going to school or going to work or coming home. And so 8 and 5, y'all are, I hit it too. And, another car that's part of the problem. So it becomes an issue.
So how do you like driving through Newtown with the roundabout construction?
Oh, yes, exactly. That'll be fun, taking kids to school, too. We see like 7,000 people going down Crane Road. The future retail development is indefinite just because they don't know what is going to happen here. They don't know, are we going to have a population that's here or not? They know it's growing, but restaurants can't survive on dinner alone. So you're probably getting close to a saturation point, at least, again, I'm probably talking a little above my knowledge base, but because retail is really not our expertise. But if you look at it, you're starting, I would think, to get to a saturation point. That if you get too many restaurants in and they don't have a lunch revenue stream, they can't be supported. So they can sort of survive because you have such a large dinner crowd that if that starts to dwindle over several people, again, you could be in a problem. So the retail, I'm sure, is like, we want to go in, but there's going to start to be a push-pull, whether that's now or 5 years from now. There's going to be some point that you're going to hit that. And so the other thing is you have residential expectations. You have a lot of people coming to this county that come from high-cost areas that have high services, and they're used to those. And there's a lot of demand for those services, and people typically are impatient, so they want them now. They want the best park and the best police and the best fire and the best, all that now. And it takes time to build that and to be more, fiscally responsible in how that's put together. And so those demands aren't going away, and it's just a lot of stress on your tax revenue. So after cost to serve, kind of looking at it again kind of globally, not specifically to Waxhaw, is industrial zoning will generate about 65% more revenue per acre than residential. So from that standpoint, you're, again, from a business mindset, how am I generating more revenue to keep my taxes low? I've got to put in some more of that. Looking at, again, that really high view of Waxhaw is basically for 1 acre of commercial industrial, it takes about 5.2 homes to make that about equal. And so in the revenue coming in. Again, the costs are going to be higher for the home, but that's about your same revenue stream. So, and if you looked at it from what I refer to as R20 or 2 houses per acre, I'm not sure what your zoning is. It R2? Is that what y'all call it when it's 2 houses? And so that would be like 2.6 houses per. So you're looking at 2.6 residential acres equals 1 industrial commercial acre, in sort of keeping your revenue stream about the same. So you don't need to see I guess to what I'm trying to say, it's not a 1-for-1. You're not having to put in a ton of commercial to make a big difference. You can put in a fairly small footprint and make a significant difference in your tax base. So again, I would say you need to start conserving, looking at that and trying to conserve about 2.6 acres, or 1 acre for every 2.6 of residential if you start to look to continue to grow. The benefits of this, it's increased career opportunities within the municipality, so that decreases that transportation impact. It's lesser commute time. So you're still going to have the same number of cars on the road. It's just they may go 5 minutes instead of 45 minutes. And you're going to keep those dollars here. They're going to bring business lunches here. So your retail development becomes a little bit more predictable. It's less burden because you're spreading that over a bigger base, a more diverse base of tax. And so your quality of place improves. Your residential values will go up, and things like that, because they have more opportunity here to have a great quality of life while still having a great life, work life, everything together. Yes, sir. Yeah, just yell at me. Stop.
Do you find precision manufacturing people begin to develop a resistance to come to an area because they are faced with a heavier tax burden than the people in the town or the county, the residential? Is that an impediment for you to bring somebody in?
They're looking at everything. I mean, the number one thing for anybody is workforce. And so if they can't, particularly now, with unemployment as low as it is, if you don't have the bodies, they're not going to come. You have a lot of bodies. The thing is, the workforce just isn't here. We just need to turn the car around and bring it back. So from that standpoint, Waxhaw's in a good place, I think. From a tax standpoint, that starts to show up as they go down the list of other things. Quality of life is significant. Again, from a recruitment of employees, particularly when you start looking at engineers, PhDs, those kind of things, you need to be able, you have a quality of place that they can recruit to versus trying to recruit, again, like, not to pick on Marlboro, but, somewhere that's extremely rural and poor. And
So it just seems to me we're somewhat handicapped by the fact that we have this burden of consumption placed on us by residential, and we don't have in this state, in this area, the same revenue streams that are available in the states from which the people who have high expectations are immigrating.
Mhm.
There's no development fees, there's no school fees, there's
no income tax at
Everybody
a
wants it.
residential or the local level. Yeah.
Right. I mean, just can't do that.
Yeah.
That feeds that
Mm-hmm.
gap.
And they do come because they don't have, like in Chicago, you don't have an income tax now like you may have had in Chicago. You have more resources
Right.
to spend on
Paid the taxes
things and
Chicago.
right. So it's just one of those things that they have to realize when they come to this area that they have to, you're getting a better quality of life in certain areas, and in others it's gonna take time to develop those. And some things may have to wait until you get a base to pay for it. So, just like with any of our budgets, sometimes you just can't put things in. You can, put a lot of debt service on pretty quick. Monroe just put on for a police station and some other stuff a 5-cent increase in their property tax this year for debt service alone. And Monroe's one of those that's almost too much. So it's too much commercial to its residential value. So it's almost flipped. It's 60-40 the other way. So, which is not healthy either. So you don't want to be too much industrial commercial.
Get them to annex us.
I'm sorry?
Get them to annex us.
Yeah, oh, God. Staying away from any of those comments. See, now you threw me
Flip
off
that
my game with
question.
that one.
So flip that question around a little bit. We have a lot of donut holes around us.
Yes.
And we never implemented an ETJ.
Mhm.
So we've never reached any agreement back when we could have.
Right.
On zoning and cooperative planning with the county. What's the incentive for somebody to locate or annex into Waxhaw assuming we get a proper use and all that stuff, not
Right,
constant, hey, let's try to get as much density as we can.
I think a lot of it's your services, having, a police force versus a county sheriff only that may have a response times that's slower, things like that really do matter. That's typically why people want to come in is either you have a service like a water and sewer that they need or a public safety. That's why, particularly in the industrial side, commercial side, that's what their magnet is to come into a municipality. And I think, you've got one of those versus being a town that doesn't have any of those services. So that does help you in that to be attractive. Because again, public safety, that's one of the top things is crime stats that they look at. So again, being from South Carolina originally, where annexation was extremely difficult and where North Carolina's sort of gone to, is donut holes are terrible. They just provide all kinds. I remember just looking at Rock Hills like a shotgun into the map at times. It was, see, all these people are taking advantage of the services that you're paying for, but you're not getting any tax off of them at all. So again, they're a drain.
There is a cost to serve.
Oh yeah, there's still a cost.
donut hole.
Because they're driving on your roads. If they hit somebody, your police is having to deal with it. Or if they shop at your shopping center, they're adding to your burden. But you're not getting, even if you were getting less than full payback, you're getting something versus nothing, and still having to cover cost. So that's one of those things that it ought to be at a certain point. And this is, I'm a laissez-faire economics kind of guy, but donut holes drive me crazy. And so that's one of those things, like if you got a certain density around it, it should just close because you're serving it anyway. So so anyway, I'm probably get a rock through my window tonight because of that too. But anyway, The town, your town is amazing. I love Waxhaw. I think a lot of people really love Waxhaw. It's got incredible strengths. We just need to make sure that those strengths are adequate enough in the long term to provide opportunities to offset your weaknesses and your threats. It's, that's something that we would like to work with you on if you were willing to have us be a part of that. Support in any way. Again, because seeing economic growth throughout our county is our job, and want to see those job opportunities. I think you need to identify some of those pockets of land. And we're doing this at a county level too. We've been doing this in Monroe for a while. I know we've worked with Wingate on this as well. Is trying to identify those pockets of land that are conducive for commercial growth. Try to figure out what you want there. But I know that it just, again, driving through, not being as familiar with Waxhaw as if I were you, living here and talking to everybody. But the Gray Byram area, the Prescott area, the Waxhaw Parkway, particularly going east, it's got all kinds of opportunity. 75 corridor obviously is a great corridor because it's a substantial road. You do have threats like the railroad always cause issues, so it'd be nice to get something that went over it. But I would suggest maybe creating some little summit with some of those landowners in those areas and try to come up with a strategy that works for them as landowners, because they're going to need to rezone, and that works for you and what you want to see the future development of Waxhaw look like. So,
What would a summit look like?
I'm sorry?
What would a summit look like?
Oh, I mean, we'd have to brainstorm, but I think it would just be around the table.
So are you volunteering to help us brainstorm then?
Sure, yes,
Okay.
sir. Whatever you and Greg and the council would want, I'm here at your disposal.
I think that, and in a very serious vein, it's hard to get started, given everything that has happened in Waxhaw so fast.
Yeah,
This is one, how do you get started?
Well, and
we don't have the expertise.
The river's current is still, I mean, you're fighting that because there's still growth coming. There's everything else. So you're having to go against that. It's not going to be easy to do this. But I think once you get the first one, it gets a little easier and people see the value of what you're putting in place. So, and you'll start to see that in the coffers. And all of a sudden you can afford something without a tax increase or maybe possibly a tax reduction. So those are good, great moments. It may take several years to get there, and some of you may not be here, when the benefit comes, unfortunately. But it's the ground that is being laid now that can make that change. So that's what's always really hard, I think. Is elected officials are limited. At times, can be limited. With every election, there's always a threat to change the direction. So you want to put in that foundation to move forward. And so even economic developers are limited too. We have a life expectancy of 3 to 5 years. So there's a lot of work that we put in that we never got to see in other areas. So big things to remember kind of going forward. And I don't know where I am on time.
Fine.
The single highest value land use you have is industrial commercial. By far. It's not even close. And so planners sometimes don't see it that way. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this. Let's put this use in industrial. Don't do that. There's a lot of places around here that have that. It's very difficult. We have one community that has an industrial park that you drive in, 53-foot trailer, and he's got to pass a consignment shop, a daycare. You got grandma dropping off a grandchild. You got somebody and get run over by, it's not, things don't go together. And so that's what happens when you start just, I don't know, dump it. Those uses are too valuable. You need to protect them as you protect anything else. So all your zoning is important, but industrial is where your money is made, the commercial industrial. And so it is not a dumping ground. The commercial base is the rock, that rock foundation that you can build so much on. You can pay for so many, all the services that people want, if you have that strong base. But again, it's got to have balance. It can't be, again, too much the other way. So residential is not bad, but residential only is non-sustainable. So make sure that you have a good blend of that. And I think you're not in a bad place. We're in a place that we can continue to make changes there. You don't want to be in a situation like Cary has been in other places where they're now having to buy residential land and try to convert it back to commercial because they have consumed all of their valuable land.
So-
We just
so
want to,
given-
so now they've thrown out a bunch of,
Yeah, so given the competitive landscape on 521, what does that present to Waxhaw, Western Union County?
right, there's always challenges. The nice thing about South Carolina is their taxes are 2 to 3 times higher than ours. So, again, people come with a misconception that South Carolina is cheaper in certain ways. They're not. And so, from a company trying to do business, as you were talking about with the taxes, I mean, even if we did not give a single penny, like if you look at it from an industrial use and incentives, in South Carolina, Lancaster gave a full fee in lieu of taxes, which is what they call their property tax incentive, gave a full incentive. We're still cheaper before we give anything with a municipal and county tax rate versus their county tax rate alone. So remember that you already have that advantage from a tax standpoint. So when they're doing their bottom line and trying to stay in the black as a business, their taxes are going to be much lower here, even with the municipal tax. So that's something to remember, that you have an advantage, but that's a big road system that they built just to be a funnel out of Charlotte. And so just like 77, they built it in 3 years while North Carolina was thinking about one for 15 with 77 widening. You know, it's South Carolina's very good at being aggressive in creating these funnels that will pull development down. 601 was big and beautiful once you crossed into South Carolina, but was the death highway while it was in Union County. And, you know, because of that, there's a Walmart distribution center down there, things like that. We've got to have some road improvements, clearly, and that's the reason the target of your commercial base, while there's going to be some retail component of that, of course, you know, like the Lowe's has been, or the Harris Teeter, or whatever you put, the businesses that will be manufacturing here will be manufacturing things that can go out on small trucks that won't, you don't want a 53-foot trailer on 16. So we would avoid those kind of targets. We would look for things that go out on a bread truck, like a FedEx truck. But again, those things rolling out are going to probably have extremely high value.
How much of
Chris?
a competitive advantage is the Monroe Airport?
Oh, I mean, it's a differentiating factor. I mean, Rock Hill has an airport, Gaston has an airport, Concord's differentiated themselves with commercial service. Monroe differentiated itself with customs. It's the only customs airport between Atlanta and roughly Richmond. It's a general aviation airport. You know, I was in charge of getting that. It was 6 years to get that. You know, nobody else is willing to do that effort. That differentiates us. So when corporate headquarters locate into Charlotte, so you have a Fortune 250 company come into Charlotte, their planes will eventually be in Monroe, because Charlotte Douglas, when they add another runway, will wipe out Wilson Air. Rock Hill is in the flight path. Gaston's too close. Monroe's the only option. And you got Allegiant and maybe somebody else kind of going up on Concord that'll gobble that up. So it's competitive in that sense that, you know, if you want to go gambling in the Caribbean, it's great to do that as well.
Chris, I have a question.
Yeah.
Now, you've been around for, 19 years? And so,
I had hair when I started.
so in your experience in traveling around Union County, and just particular, for Waxhaw in particular, we've been talking about this for years and years and years.
So we've done several SWATs.
Yeah, what is in your opinion, what is the reason that these type of businesses don't come to Waxhaw and haven't come to Waxhaw?
I think primarily there's no place to go from a zoning standpoint. So we need to find some pockets and get some of the boundaries out of the way, because clearly the road system is built for residential traffic. So you've got to overcome some of the road situation. But like, you know, there's potentially some pockets that may have some infrastructure issues as well that I hope are getting fixed now. But around the Waxhaw Parkway is sort of an area that I've looked at several times, and that flows great. We've got capacity where it flows sewer-wise. It's a big open canvas to kind of really plan and do it right. You don't want it to sort of develop hodgepodge. You want to be able to control that a little bit. And, given that, if you put some things in place, I think they would come in, particularly if you have some expectations of what you want. So if there be that covenants, be that some other things that, that they understand the rules of the playground, they would come in. One of the things that I've talked to some people about in hopes of maybe pitching it to you guys is a virtual building. And so finding a spot, a property where we can go through the permitting process, get it all done. And so it's virtual, so it's ready to go. The plans are approved, and someone just buys that and goes. And so they don't have any time. So we want to eliminate time. Time is a big deal for a lot of folks, particularly now, because if they've waited, all the buildings are gone. So we have basically one building in Union County that's marketable in all of Union County. So one way to make Waxhaw differentiated a little bit is to provide some things like that. Be a little different. Doesn't cost a lot of money. It's not like building a spec building like Monroe has done, but it will definitely alleviate some of those time hurdles. Particularly, Waxhaw hasn't seen a lot of that. So there's some learning curve as you go through those processes of permitting buildings that are industrial focused and things like that.
So if that, I guess my
Or
next
even a commercial
question,
office building would be the same.
I don't know if you
I don't know if I'm
answer
answering.
or not, but
Yeah.
if that were available, do you know of companies that would come here?
I don't necessarily know of companies right off the top of my head, but there would definitely be companies looking. I mean,
Okay.
you have companies that, like NN went in at Waverly. So if you look at some of the high rises in Waverly, they took the top 2 floors. Came from like Johnsonville, Tennessee. That could have been a Union County project. I mean, I guarantee you every one of those people live in Union County. But they live there. Why is that building not built somewhere along 16 or Ray Road? So if that was here, we would have an opportunity. It's all about the, at-bats. If you don't have it, you don't have the opportunity. So right now, we're not even getting the opportunity to see some of these projects that would most likely pick us. But I think particularly in the smaller, you talk about a 40-person software development company, that'd be a fantastic hit. And that could go in really anywhere. They don't like the railroad. I know IT doesn't like railroad, so because it messes the zen of their doing whatever they're doing. But
I live by the railroad. I love the railroad.
no, I know, but the noise, they're sitting on their beanbag trying to come up with something. The railroad can be disruptive to them.
Easy.
I know. Well, I'm very opinionated. Sorry. You've got so many opportunities. We just need to sort of get over the hurdle.
Yeah.
Sit down and talk about it. I think it's really just let's kind of throw some spaghetti on the wall and really look at this, and then give me and give whoever between Kurt and myself. There's other pockets that we can drive and try to find you some things.
So what you're kind of getting at off of Brenda's question is that we should probably take our comprehensive plan, look at it, and say, okay, what does this really mean? This section, what does that really mean to us? Because if you think of it, one of the pieces of land that you have here is Prescott. That's got such an oppressive conditional use permit on it, it's hard for anybody to come in and do anything with it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with.
But I mean,
You look at it, and
you look at the
wow,
list,
beast.
somebody looks at it and they say, that's time. That would equate to your point.
Yeah, time is
It's time, and so they move on to the next piece. And then
Right.
the next.
Remember, you're not competing with yourself. You're
Right.
competing with every other community around you. So, time is a bad thing. It's more because that's money.
Okay. Questions over here?
I think you covered, I'd made a note to ask you about Prescott Commercial also, and you've answered that question. The trick will be to convince the current owner that there's an opportunity to be had.
Sure. And we've reached out to them too. It's frustrating with that. But there's some other like if you drive down, you turn between the McDonald's and go out, and you see the new medical office building that's being built there, or planned for there. That's great. I mean, that's commercial too. Those are that's what we need to see. Yeah. So they're not a huge impact on the system, but it does help your quality of place.
But our road systems are, you have to look at that, knowing what our road systems and infrastructure is to handle something like that in looking at a safety issue, which in my mind, safety is number one.
But there's the traffic pattern of commercial is different. So it's not going to be your 8 to 5. They're going to be traveling when the pressure's off that road. So, they'll either be doing it late at night or they'll be doing it in the midday. So, that's something, that there's a lot of utility in that road. It's just too much for the at times of the day, more than it is. At least it goes along with, economics and my traffic engineering.
So what's your football prognostication ability?
I can't jinx it.
Okay.
I'm just saying we're #1 preseason in Sports Illustrated.
So you just jinxed it. Any other questions for Chris?
I really appreciate the opportunity. Again, you can tell I will overtalk this because I love it, and so.
And just the one big outcome is you committed to coming and helping us work on helping with the SWOT and then helping us frame what a planning summit would be.
Yeah, however I can be assistance,
Okay.
I'm here.
Good. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Core infrastructure and services.
So tonight, Matt was due up to give parts of the presentation, but Matt is still on an airplane, and his flight got delayed coming back into town today. So Todd and Kurt are going to take the majority of a couple of the presentations, and Todd's going to start with our Powell bill plans for the fiscal year that we're in, kind of the street resurfacing maintenance and kind of how that's scored and what we anticipate for the coming year. So he's up first with that information.
I found out about this about an hour ago. On the resurfacing, we did a lot this year. Dunsmore, Southbrook. There's some places like in Lawson where the developer's doing it. Lawson Drive, we found out that they didn't have the right amount of stone. So we made them reclaim. Instead of us reclaiming every street in town, we're going to start doing core samples of the old streets, like the Oaks, Hermitage Place, Estes Manor, Woodley. All those were built in the county and brought into the city after they were built. So we have no clue what's under them. You take Hillcrest, built in the 60s, no clue what's under that. So we don't start, we rent our own core machine doing our own core samples because that gets pricey, but we can do it in-house. If we reclaim all of them, like we reclaimed Anklin Forest, the back part of Anklin Forest, it was $268,000, but the developer did it. A lot of the new streets we get nowadays are good streets. We've done a lot of storm repairs. That's another thing we want to look at on the old streets, do some camera work to see what's under there, because we get a lot of bad pipe. Stuff like we got the gasket hanging out, and like in Hermitage Place, we had one pipe separate, and it took 19 years before it sucked the dirt down. We had a sinkhole. But now we can come in and do a pipe patch. And all my guys are certified, even Marian's certified, our secretary. I told her she needs to know what we're doing. So we all got certified so we can do our own. But a lot of the developers are doing their own now. We had over probably 750 repairs. Probably looking at close to a little over $2 million that the developers paid for, that we caught with our camera. So we're using a new product now. We got 3 different people doing it. It's called a rejuvenator. It just freshens up the road and adds life to it. We did Summerlin, Jackson over there by you. We did a piece of the street. We used 3 different ones. 2 of them we paid for, and then I found a guy called Sealmaster. He come in and did the one up there at McDonald Street from church in front of the McDonald House to 16. So we seeing how that works. A lot of times you can go in and on some of these roads we think we have to pave. We don't really have to. We can go in and seal crack, and then rejuvenate, which is paint the road, and it'll give it 4 or 5 years more life. So you can do more roads and not have to put all your money into one street. But this year, we're looking at Poplar Grove, Aston Manors, Harrison Park Drive. There's one more, I can't remember which one it is. But we don't do those this year, but we don't test them out before we do it to see how we really need to do it. But we can save a lot of money if we really know what's under it. You don't have to go in and reclaim or mill. Just like Millbridge, they getting ready to start a project next week. I had it wrote down. They're getting ready to do 22 streets, and they don't mill every street and come back with 1.5 inches to 2 inches of asphalt. So when we take it over, we're getting a brand new street. All the pipes been repaired up underground. That was just in 3 phases and 6 maps. They had over 500 repairs. But in Lawson, we had like 100 repairs. But in the new part of Lawson, where they knew we were going to start Cameron, they had 3 repairs at all of Lawson in the new part. So now that they know we're doing it, so they moved out of the old part of Millbridge, which is 2006 when the economy crashed, kind of, to the new stuff today. The other day they cambered, I don't know, probably 1,000 feet of line. They had 1 repair that we have to fix. But if you don't fix them, you don't have. That's where the sinkholes come from. So, but we're getting there and getting a lot better. All my guys are road scholar certified out of state. I took the class, so I'm certified. So we know a lot more about it from the last 7, 8 years than when we first started. So, since we took it over, we started really getting into it. And a lot of the developers are really listening to us. They making the roads good for us. They're not really arguing about it. So, I mean, you got a road down, and the only thing you need to do is just overlay it and leave. But you could overlay it for probably $60,000, and they'd reclaim it for $262. That's pretty good. So, and you're getting probably a 20-year road versus a 10-year road. So, but any questions?
One or two. I understand because of the ordinances and the policies and procedures that have been, put in place, that the quality of the roads we're getting now is better. But still have, how do we go about putting away money for 15, 20 years from now as our network of roads grow and grow and grow? 20 years from now, Millbridge is going to start having to have streets repaired and replaced. Where's all that going to come from?
I think one positive thing that Todd just shared is that these roads that are being repaired have not been accepted. So if you think about what will be added to Powell bill for the future, it's roads that we're currently not maintaining. So the roads that are new, that are coming in from this point forward, that either have been repaired or they're being built to better standards because they know they're going to be inspected and required to, as those are added to the Powell bill map, we're getting good roads that should be at the tail end of that 15 to 20 year cycle.
Right.
Versus he named some roads off in some of the neighborhoods that should not have been a problem yet, but because of design and maybe
Poorly constructed.
construction, whatever, they came up and we've spent money on them already. So I think from a positive standpoint, if we can address the worst failing roads, which the system's set up to do that, then the new stuff that's being added will be at the very bottom of the list. And so I would contend that we're already seeing a bubble, the bad bubble of things that weren't really put in correctly to start with. So there is definitely a maintenance bubble depending on what year something's built. But because of the size of some of the neighborhoods and the fact that we haven't accepted the streets yet, we don't have an occurrence where we had 1,000 houses and 1,000 street not miles, but miles associated with those houses that were all accepted in 1 year. So what we're seeing really kind of is a phased and incremental acceptance of those neighborhood streets, which is a good thing. It spreads it out.
You know, that part I understand. I'm just thinking in 2040, what's Millbridge going to look like? What's it going to require? What's Lawson going to look like? What's it going to require? Do we start putting funds, you know, in a pot now to be ready for that? You know, a few dollars every year, so when 2040 goes up, it's not like, oh my God, they all go at the same time.
So the interesting thing about the Powell bill is that there is a requirement in the state law that says you cannot accumulate more than 5 years appropriation. So if you think about what 5 years appropriation means, that is a sliding amount because it's the last 5 years. So as your appropriation goes up, the total dollar figure that you can hold in reserve increases. We're not going to get anywhere close to that figure anytime soon, but it should be a goal if we can, and we can get through some of the needier repair jobs to start accumulating some Powell bill fund balance. As we do add some new roads that have been constructed correctly or been fixed, and we add them to the system, we should think deliberately about if we can create a Powell bill fund balance, because to your point, there will be years where if there were 5 roads that typically get fixed, you may have 7 to 8 that need to be addressed. So we've had years, and we're doing it where we've had to appropriate some Powell bill fund balance in addition to the 300 and so thousand that we get. It's about 320 that we see on an annual basis, but we've had a year where we've said we need to spend 500 this year to kind of get caught up. But you can't do that and deplete that Powell bill down into no fund balance and then not be able to, you know, kind of address more than 5 roads or 4 roads in a year. So you need some flexibility there. So we're always going to want to try to keep some Powell bill fund balance there, just because a bridge or a culvert might blow out somewhere and we might have to go in and repair it.
So, kind of keying off of Fred's question, we got 60 miles of roads, 40 of which are the towns. I think as we go through this year, it would and approach next budget year, it would be helpful to understand of that 40, these pavement conditions. Is what we get in the Powell bill enough even? My answer to that is no. So how are we ever going to save, accumulate funds? What are we going to do about that? Because I think you ask any citizen, they could pick out a road that they think needs improvement. The question is, how much do we have to improve now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And Powell bill isn't going to cover it. I don't see us ever saving any Powell bill money, given what little we get. So how do we address that? And that's not not something you can rip off the top of your head right now. It's just something I think we got to think about as we go forward.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do with the rejuvenator. Matthews has got one. It must be real good because it takes 6 hours to dry, and they hired a golf cart company to come and haul the people to their houses so nobody would ride on it. But they said it's supposed to give up to 8 years of life to a road. So if you take these new roads that you already getting 17, 18 years, 2 or 3 years, put this down on it, which is not that expensive, you might get another 8 years out of it, plus the 18. So there's so much new stuff coming out today. It's what makes a road bad is, and why our roads a lot of them are like they are, is when we had that downtime and some of the roads cracked. Well, a road is like a tooth decay. Once it cracks, water gets into the subgrade and it starts felling the road, just like a cavity would fail your tooth. If you don't fix it, seal it, let it dry out, then it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And that's what some of these roads have done. So that's why a lot of the developers are having to reclaim and stuff like that. And it's good. I mean, they're doing it for us, so it's not costing the town right now. Like last year, we brought in 33 streets, and probably 8 of them were reclaimed. And that's a lot of money. They measured out to see how much Portland cement needs to go per square yard, and some of it's 52 pounds, some of it's 32 pounds, and they mix it all in and grade it back out and haul off what they don't need. But then it sits for 72 hours. It's like concrete. It's just, it won't, I mean, it's like 8 inches of concrete. Because normally they mill down or reclaim down about 12 inches.
It's a balancing act, because half our population sits on roads that are 15 years or older, which is getting to that.
Well, you look at Hillcrest, some of those are
Exactly.
probably 30 years old.
Yeah.
We got one road over in Esaw that's probably 32 years old, probably one of the best roads we got. I mean, it's holding up. It's got cracks in it, but it's old asphalt and it's holding up. Today, they put so much recycle in the asphalt that it don't hold up like it used to. That's another reason why a lot of people's coming up with these rejuvenators, trying to give them more life.
Two observations. One is there's a structural problem at the state level with the Powell bill, and it's based on gas tax, and that's based on number of miles traveled. And as cars get more efficient and other electric cars and other things come into play, there's just less gas being sold, equivalent to the population growth. And so structurally, the system is not really set up to have long-term maintenance. So if you ask other communities in the Charlotte region, we're not alone in saying the Powell bill will not carry the maintenance needs long-term. There are communities where they've looked at it and said, given what we have for the Powell bill funding, it's going to take us about 30 years to get through resurfacing all of our roads. Well, nobody believes that these roads will last for 30 years because some of them are already failing. So structurally, a statewide issue is if Powell bill is ever changed by the legislature, we need to be actively involved and engaged in that discussion. The other thing that's happened at the state level is there's been some discussion of turning NCDOT numbered, 4-numbered roads over to towns or counties. And so if that resurfaces as a discussion point, we want to definitely be at the table advocating that if that's indeed the fact, that there be given flexibility to look at other funding sources other than Powell bill, or they restructure the Powell bill, or they do something to make it more economically viable for a town to have roads in its jurisdiction. The one thing that could happen is that there would have to be some agreement between towns and counties as to how to maintain roads if that ever occurred, because many of the roads that you travel around our town on are county and then they turn into town, and so you might not even know what municipality or county you're in. So there'd have to be some real thought about how that would work if you're trying to maintain a stretch of road and it's in the town and in the county. So a lot of issues there, but if that comes back up in the legislature, we need to definitely make our voice heard as to the long-term structural Powell bill funding. And every community is facing the same thing as 10, 15, 20 years out. The anticipation is, unless there's some change in how Powell works, there'll be local tax dollars involved in trying to work on roads. And so that gets really back to a healthy discussion about a CIP, and part of a CIP might be maintaining what you have. And that kind of dovetails with this, STP and trying to make sure that we have some flexibility there, because long term, we're going to have to maintain the roads. The good news, I think, really, though, is what Todd said, is a lot of these that you think might be in town already, we haven't actually taken. So.
Yep.
Well, the other part of that, too, is we're surrounded by municipalities that do not play in the Powell bill. So I think you said 15 municipal governing agencies, including the county. Of those, 3 or 4 play in the Powell bill. The rest of it is all going into the state hopper, which further exacerbates the funding problem.
Well, I think the good news is that there's a reliable municipal entity to actually try to work on this problem. And so that goes back to Chris's presentation, is for a company that's looking to be in a community, labor force, quality of life, transportation, all that, but it's also responsible local government. And if the local government is not responsible, or doesn't feel like that's a service they need to provide, the company's not going to locate there. They don't want to be, if they wanted to be in an area that Chris called in South Carolina, they'd be in a low tax, low service, low everything environment, but that's not what they want. Quality of life, more and more and more. Even the companies that you think might not be high tech, or they're wanting quality of life, and they're wanting proximity to things that their residents would like to do. So roads is a big part of that.
I talked to a guy from the state about 3 years ago, city of Charlotte. He takes over the streets. He said the Powell bill they get is 1.7 million, and they put 14 million with it. And really, before the past couple of years, we really never put anything with it. We've just been trying to play catch up. But now we're getting good streets coming from the neighborhoods, so it's making it a lot easier. Maybe one day we can have a work session on how do you take the streets over, what's involved in taking the streets. Like Ridgehaven, they started turning that over to us in 2011. And we just now took it. Y'all took it a couple months ago. I walked that street 9 times before we finally took it. I mean, just keep marking stuff, marking stuff, marking stuff. Then finally, they just milled everything and repaved. It was easier.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much.
So Kurt's up next. He's going to talk about some other infrastructure projects that are going on and kind of go through where we are on those, and certainly take any questions that you have. And I think we've got the TAP project loaded up first.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Any news?
I don't know what you mean. We'll see. So, what we're gonna, I've got 3 presentations here, and so I'll go ahead and tell you kind of what they're gonna be, so we can decide how much we want to spend on each one, because I'd like it also just to be a discussion. It's the first one is the TAP grant. Then there's the Waxhaw Marvin sidewalk, which is the CDBG project, and then also downtown parking. So those are the 3 areas that I have here. First of all, the TAP grant. We're not going to go through the concepts in great detail this time, because we've done that a few times, and unless there's any questions on some particular parts of the project, which I'd be happy to answer. But we will talk about schedule update, how we're moving from concept to design, specifically what we've been working on since I was last before the board in March on this topic. Talk about a funding source change, which is actually on the consent agenda for the regular meeting tonight, and then a budget update. So schedule, we talked last time in March. We started preliminary design in March, and we are currently, we've reached 65% design for the project, and still very close to the schedule that we originally set out on. So we're happy with the progress we've made. When you're coordinating with so many different stakeholders, it can be difficult to kind of keep it moving on the schedule that you would like. This project, I think it's important to just think about how we're dealing with CSX, we're dealing with NCDOT, Federal Highway Administration, CRTPO, downtown stakeholders, downtown property owners, and then internal staff. I'm probably forgetting some Union County Public Works. So there's a lot going into the project, but we're considering all that. I think we're moving at a good pace. What does concept to design mean? This is just an example. We were doing the concept phase up until March, and we presented those to the board, and now we're actually into the engineering drawings. Now we're actually getting closer to the point where we would have a construction-ready project. So really finding out if our project fits in the right-of-way, what utility challenges they're going to be, what's going to need to move where, and really getting to the nuts and bolts of seeing what this project can and will look like on the ground. And also, as you go through, as you get closer to that 100% design, the construction cost estimate gets a little bit, we can be a little more confident about that as well. So since March, we did complete the environmental review. What that means is that fortunately, we did qualify for categorical exclusion, which means there's no major environmental mitigation that's going to need to be done as part of the project. Continuing coordination with CSX Railroad, we worked with the Waxhaw Historic Preservation Commission on some bridge modification. At the overhead bridge, we have to make a small modification to the kind of the planter box looking area to fit the sidewalk, which will lead over to the mill on Main. Coordination with Ardmore Apartments. So Ardmore Apartments has some roadway improvements that are part of their project, and some of those overlap with the TAP grant. So we've been meeting with their engineers to make sure that we decide kind of who's going to do what and when, and then talk to the property owners who will be impacted by that work. So currently staff has provided our feedback now back to our engineering firm, Gresham Smith and Partners, who will take that and it'll kind of be a back and forth as we hone in on it. Funding source change. This is it's a big deal, but fortunately everything has been taken care of. So the town we were awarded the grant and officially by CRTPO in spring of 17, but
I just want to alleviate everybody's concern. It's not a big deal from the CRTPO. We're just changing funding buckets, and it requires paperwork.
Exactly.
So
exactly. Yeah.
Money didn't change, timeline didn't change, or anything.
Yes, that is true. So but it's just important to note that there was a federally initiated funding rescission, but fortunately we were able to just exchange some funds that are not at risk for that rescission, and that's the supplemental agreement that handles that. Again, paperwork is on the regular agenda tonight as well. So it's good news. Nothing changes with the project, but did want the board to be aware. Project budget again. These are very preliminary estimates. So while it looks like that we have some sort of a pretty good amount of wiggle room in the budget, I mean, it's better than the alternative, but it could still change as we get closer to that 100% number. And even we already anticipate the design contract and that construction contract probably bumping up some just because of some changes on the East North Main side of things that we've become aware of in the past couple weeks. But it's good news that we're not showing overages this early on. So next steps: complete preliminary plans this summer, move into final design, and then in the winter. It says right-of-way. We don't anticipate having to acquire any permanent right-of-way. We're talking about temporary construction easements, but that still requires some conversations with those property owners and with CSX as well. So that's what that is. Then we hope to go to bid sometime in winter, and I would say more conservatively late spring of 19 would be a good target date still for construction. I think that's. And I always show this slide because I think it's important, but it's exciting that we're implementing some projects that were called out in plans a long time ago, but consistently called out in those plans. It's really making an impact downtown, and it definitely helps embody our brand story. So, are there questions about the TAP grant?
You mentioned something on South North Main.
East
East North Main that you just found out. What was that?
Well, when we started looking at, originally we were going to try to utilize some of the existing sidewalk as part of the pedestrian plaza. It's looking like it's going to be more difficult to do that. And so we're working with our engineer right now to see which part is kind of salvageable and which part needs to be redone completely, just to try to maximize cost savings, but also make it look good as well.
Back to the timeline, if you could just go back.
This one?
Yeah, okay, so is the construction bidding, is that winter 2018? And then the construction, is that,
So December, January, February.
okay, so the
yeah.
construction will start spring of 2019, and then how long are you anticipating it to take? How long for the construction?
Don't have a
No.
timeline on that yet. And part of that is because it can be, since we're kind of all over the place downtown, we're all the way from South Main to the other end of East South Main, north on Broome. We're talking about street lights as well. A lot of it, we don't know how it's going to be phased yet and which parts are going to happen when. But that also brings up a good point about events. We're talking with Parks and Rec and making sure that they're with us each step of the way, so we can work that out as well.
So just to give a little bit of perspective, about a year ago when Kurt presented, the then board specifically asked him not to try to begin construction during the Christmas season, if you will, the holiday season, and have construction going on during our busiest time downtown. So that's why that was pushed some, because I think originally you were looking at getting some of the construction bidding and then starting, I think at one point you said December.
At one point.
And we said, wait a minute, that's going to cause, so that, hey, that was one time where we asked you to slow down.
Looking at Dina, yeah.
So, but by the same token, I don't think there's anybody that really desires to slow it down once you get started.
No.
I think everybody
once
wants
it's
it.
going, yeah.
So. Okay. Other questions?
The next one is Waxhaw. Is Waxhaw Marvin ready?
Why don't you explain this chart? Because it's been up there for a while. No, I'm just kidding.
See the key. Payment conditions. Okay, Waxhaw Marvin Road sidewalk. This is the CDBG funded project. So go through an overview, talk about CDBG funding structure, and just give an update here. The biggest update will be about right-of-way needs. Again, project came out of the Downtown Neighborhoods Plan in 2014, connecting, it's kind of hard to see, connecting, so going from Utah Drive to Fallondale Road on the western side of Waxhaw Marvin Road. That will complete a connection between Millbridge and downtown Waxhaw, and also serve a lot of the residents on that corridor. So we're excited about that. It's about a third of a mile of sidewalk, and downtown neighborhood says over 6,000 residents just from this connection. So how the project is structured, it's Union County receives funds now from the Federal Housing and Urban Development. Union County is now an entitlement community because reached a population threshold, which means each year Union County will now be able to get or will receive funds, and then the different municipalities can ask for them. So Waxhaw is a subrecipient, and it's a 100% reimbursement grant. This is the original project budget, which had $235,000 for design and construction. The town did have to pay for the environmental review portion of the project, and so for a total cost of $240,000. So this is how it was set up. Let's see, last time I presented on this, I believe was January, so January or February. So since then, we actually acquired an engineering firm, or hired one. We began the design and engineering process. We actually had a community meeting in this room in May for the residents. This is a flyer we sent out, a mailer to everyone along the corridor. And we completed preliminary design. So we were moving right along. And then
Did you get good participation in the community meeting?
we had one person. Yeah. It was but that one person was the HOA manager of Millbridge, so kind of representative of a lot of folks. I guess you could look at it in that light. So we were moving fairly fairly unencumbered with the exception of that it's a federal grant, so there are a lot of requirements we have to work with each step of the way. But through the process, we became aware, through the design process, it became evident that right-of-way would actually be required, and that's permanent right-of-way. That was unexpected. When I talked earlier about the TAP grant and said, in the design process, you actually figure out if your project will fit in the right-of-way. In this case, this one won't. So there's some drainage issues along Waxhaw Marvin Road that would require the sidewalk to be pushed back further from the road than we had anticipated. Otherwise, the sidewalk would either be underwater when it rained, or we'd have to push it so close to the road that it really wouldn't create the kind of condition that we wanted for people to use. We're trying to keep it 6 feet back. And then, or it would turn into a major drainage project, which these funds are really not set up to do, or at least not how we've been awarded them. So this has budget and schedule impacts, and that's why this previous slide, we selected a property acquisition firm. It's the same firm that the town is going to be working with for Kensington, but we had to get them verified through HUD as okay to use. Yes.
I know we're doing the Waxhaw Marvin corridor study. Will that information be fed into what you're doing with sidewalks? In other words, make sure the sidewalk won't be put in a place where the road will come through, widen it, and have to redo the sidewalk.
Yeah, we're working. This was one of the first in the initial conversations with the Waxhaw Marvin study. We provided this kind of information. Said, hey, this is what we're planning, and they've been in on it. So it's a good question. Yeah. Say it has budget impacts, but likely not for the town. Fortunately, again, it's a CDBG funded project. So we're working with Union County right now to update our agreement with them. We've asked for additional funds, and that comes from, here you have, so we actually came in a little under on design and engineering at 19, but to do the right-of-way mapping, to work with the property acquisition firm on negotiations for the right-of-way, and then to actually purchase the right-of-way, we've estimated that $108,000. Construction estimates actually are lower than we anticipated, at least right now. But even with the design and construction coming in a little under, the need for right-of-way has pushed the cost up. So we're asking the county for an additional $57,126, and we spoke with them. We presented that request to them last week, and we're just waiting on a confirmation from the county on that. We don't anticipate at this time any town funds being required to complete the project, but what this does is it's going to push out the schedule significantly from what we at one point, because we finished design in May, and at one point we were hoping to do construction in late summer, and now that's not going to be realistic. What I highlighted in yellow there is the new pieces of the schedule that were not originally part of it. That's your right-of-way process, and so now we're hoping to go to construction in next spring or early summer. I believe that's it. So are there additional questions on that? All right.
Good to go.
Good, thanks. Here's that chart again. Next one would be parking. That's.
Can you give us, just take a quick little break here?
Sure.
Come back at 7 minutes, 22.
Okay. So downtown Waxhaw parking. This is a fun one because I know that I hear a lot about parking on a pretty regular basis downtown. It's one of the things that comes up most often from the business owners and from visitors and residents alike. And it'll be pretty neat today because I'll get to show you some work that we've done to look at the current status of parking and also where we've been, and then see on a trajectory where we think we might be going. We continue to hear about parking. Since 2015, when I actually started with the town, it was a question that came up. We did a parking study in 2016, and to kind of assess it, say, where are we? Let's see if we truly have a parking problem here in downtown, and then make a strategy to address it. And what I would say before anything else is that all successful downtowns have a parking problem. If you don't have a parking problem, then you're not doing well as a downtown, because downtowns, especially historic downtowns, were not built with automobile traffic in mind, at least not to the extent that we have it today. And so while it can be a headache, it's also a sign in many cases of a successful downtown. Now, that doesn't mean you don't want to try to mitigate the problem and to improve it, but I think that it's important to say that it's a sign of some vibrancy. So we looked at, staff decided probably late last fall to update the study from 16, because we know that we've grown as a town a lot in those 2 years, and we also know that even specifically downtown has seen a lot of change, especially in uses that require a lot of parking, like restaurants and a new brewery and coming soon new apartments. So we wanted to take another look at it. In 2016, so Kimley Horn did the study with us. They established peak times, so when is parking when is demand the highest. They divided the town up. It's easier to see on this slide, but they divided the town up into parking sectors, they called them, 11 different sectors, and counted all the spaces, and then they actually manually counted cars. I think they sent an intern, but they manually counted cars at those peak times to try to get a sense of what the demand was like. That was their approach. The key findings were that the peak times in downtown Waxhaw for parking, probably like you would expect, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., 5 to 7 on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So lunch and dinner, Thursday through Saturday. Now, this is, of course, excluding events. But the overall system, so the total number, for all the parking spaces in downtown, if you looked at them, they had a high of 43% occupancy at the peak times. The rule of thumb in parking management industry is that 85% is where you really considered full, or where you're having a problem, because at that level of occupancy, people really perceive that the parking is full, and it could deter them from visiting that restaurant, shop, location, because you circle a couple times and you're not going to see anything at that level of occupancy. So at that time in 2016, the Kimley Horn finding it, one of their key findings was that demand would have to double for there to really be, for Waxhaw to really be approaching a problem. So there were some things that we could do in the meantime, though, to help fix the perception of lack of parking and to help alleviate some of the imbalance of parking, meaning that around certain areas of the downtown, parking really was a lot more full than 43%. And so shared parking was one of the recommendations that came from the study, charging for events parking, and then time-limited parking. This is another quote from the study, that charging $5 a car, they estimated could bring in a pretty significant amount of revenue charging for events, charging $5 during events. What have we done? What did we do with those recommendations? We implemented some of them. We did a shared parking agreement with the Women's Club in 2016, late 2016, I believe. Early 17, we added 30 spaces that are now publicly available when the Women's Club is not having their own private event. We did a shared agreement with the clock shop, so at the northeast corner of Howie Mine and North Broome. Added another 20 spaces. The events division has worked on a shared agreement with at the Historic Ventures property to use during events. So we've certainly taken some steps with shared parking, and it helped add some spaces. We expanded the Nevin Price surface gravel parking lot, 12 spaces, which is, it's every little bit that we can pick up is helpful. We did that this year. We've started doing voluntary time-limited spaces because we haven't taken that step towards enforced spaces yet, but we have, in response to some of the restaurants and certain retail shops as well, we have put in some time-limited parking signs as recently as, I guess, early July. So we've improved signage. We took our existing wayfinding signs and tried to improve the arrows, tried to add more signs so that people could find the parking. And then from an ordinance standpoint, we recently passed, the board recently passed commercial vehicles downtown rule to where, so you can't have commercial vehicles taking up spaces that could be used for visitors to downtown. And we've kept people away, tried to keep people away from intersections, most recently with that ordinance that passed as well. So I think we've taken some real steps since 2016 to improve parking downtown. But that being said, we know downtown's grown a lot. We've had a net gain of 13 businesses. There's been an addition of 63 housing units with the mill on Main, and we actually lost a significant number of spaces. They're privately owned behind the crossroads, but for a long time the public was using them. That was about 30 spaces that was for years and years were being used, and now that's no longer available. So even though as the town adds shared parking, as the town adds gravel parking where we could, the net gain hasn't been as high.
So the housing units, Mill on Main?
The mill on Main.
So did you subtract their parking, or is that included in the figure?
They do have their own parking, but what I'm trying to show is just that they're going to have visitors coming downtown more often and things like that. So yeah. So with all these changes, we thought those parking counts are probably outdated, and I think that most of the folks downtown would agree. So we did a recount, but this time we didn't use a consultant. We did it internally with the help of our IT department. Special thanks to Matt Falkenberry. We actually took the drone, the IT town drone, up into the air on some of these peak times here that you see on the screen there. And we actually did one during a Jammin' by the Tracks concert too, so we could really ensure that we were capturing when is downtown at its peak regular occupancy, and then peak even during an event. Even though that's just a minor event, it still definitely brought a lot of people down. That was the Zach Brown cover band, so that was a lot of people. So what happened? Well, there's 474 spaces in our study area. I know it's kind of small, but we'll look at it a few different ways. When we compare a Saturday in 2016 to a Saturday in March of 17, we had about a 9% increase in occupancy when you compared those 2 days directly. However, in the evening time, we had a town-wide utilization of 72%, and if you remember from the 2016 study, we never got above 43. And these are the sectors, so you see what happens here, and I'll show you this in a map in a second, but you have some sectors like 4 and 5 and 7 and really 6 where you're at 100%. So the perception from folks who come to try to go to a restaurant that's in one of those sectors is there's no parking. And no matter what you say, they're gonna feel like there's no parking. The restaurant's gonna think there's no parking for their customers, and you can understand why, because it is 100% in some areas. That being said, we have a lot of sectors where hardly anyone's parking there, and that's something that we can talk about a little later, how to maybe address that. This was Friday, June the 1st, so during the concert, 77%. And that's really pushing that 85% that I said was the rule of thumb for when we consider to have a problem. And this one's especially interesting. You have over 100% occupancy in some sectors, which I'll show you how that's possible with some pictures. So this is 108% in Sector 4. You see people are being creative, parking on the grass, parking in ditches. And that was where there used to be parking. So people are being very creative and really packing in there. So you can see how if you came upon the town and you see the concert going on in the gravel lot across the street and you look for parking, you're going to think there's no parking, especially if you're not familiar with Waxhaw, if you're just visiting. These are the parking sectors that had, excuse the rudimentary graph here, but these are the parking sectors that had over 85% occupancy on March 3rd. So you see, I mean, this is along the railroad tracks on both sides of North and South Main. This is the brewery area, Black Chicken area, Antiques, Mary O'Neill's, and barbershop area, I mean, Bike Depot. This is, the core of downtown was, for all practical purposes, full. And so especially you could see how people would perceive this when they were trying to park. It was even greater at the concert on June 1st. You see, I mean, you've got 7 or 8 sectors in downtown that were over 85%, and some of those were over 100%. Here's the trajectory over time. I know it's kind of hard to see, but these are just snapshots. But from Thursday in December 15 to Friday in June of 18, every time we've counted, it's gone up. Granted, I haven't counted dozens of times, but we have picked the peak times. So you see it's really approaching that 85% number. And it's doubled. Just like the study said, there could be an issue if it doubles. We're about there. So I asked the question, is there a parking problem? And 6 out of the 13 sectors had over 85% in March. 8 of them had it in June. Our highest utilization almost doubled from 2016. That being said, this was the Women's Club at that exact same time. 4 cars, 5 cars. So I still, you know, I'm divided as downtown manager. Sometimes my quick reaction is to say, no, we don't have a problem. There it is. You could have parked there. But again, I understand that there is a perception that happens when you arrive, and as far as you can see, in every direction, there's no parking. But this is the reality. This was taken at the same time that this was. And it's shorter to walk from the Women's Club to the gravel concert lot than it is to walk from one end of the Lowe's parking lot to the other. So here's some strategies, and I'd love to have a discussion here and see what you think. But more shared parking agreements, is that a way to continue adding new publicly available spaces? Currently, there are a lot of spaces behind the buildings on South Main Street, and I know that a couple property owners have expressed interest in working with the town if we wanted to on some improvements in behind those buildings. Designated business owner parking, that's an idea. And what I mean by that is a lot of business owners are parking out in front of their businesses. I know their cars. And if you had a parking lot, let's say you use the Women's Club, since the town has the lease there, or the Clock Shop, or the Niven Price, wherever that the town controls, and said, this is designated business owner parking for downtown businesses. it gives the businesses some skin in the game then to say to their employees and to their staff, there's parking for you. It is reserved. There's 30 spaces for you at this location, and it would get them off the streets. If they decided not to use it, then that would ultimately be the business owners then who would have to kind of bear part of that responsibility for the problem of parking. That's just an idea. Improve signage, continue doing that. Why are people not parking at the Women's Club? That's something we've improved signage. Jenny's helped us with a great map. The business owners have the map. I'm still just trying to understand that one. The crosswalk's going to be improved with the TAP grant. I know that's still a ways off. I know that crosswalk there can be kind of intimidating for folks with the flags. Other things we can do, we can actually implement time-limited parking. So right now it's voluntary. Valet parking has come up as an idea. One of our restaurants has suggested that. The events team does a great job with shuttles during events. And then as new infill comes in, I know there's not a lot of room for infill downtown, but as it does come in with the new Historic Ventures property at some point perhaps, are there opportunities to build in some public-private partnerships from the get-go? So that's what I have on parking.
I have a question about the parking that's behind, I guess it would be, well, there's Crossroads, and in between Crossroads and the brewery, there's that lot that I think you showed the picture where is that the one you said was taken away, the parking space is taken away?
Yes, I mean, for many years, from what I understand and what I observed up until about a year ago it was just, I mean, it is private property, so it was never public, but it was kind of just everyone could park there. It was never enforced.
But is that owned by the person that owns the building there?
It's owned by the person who owns the Crossroads Coffee Shop building and that lot. It's not the Crossroads Coffee Shop owner.
And have we ever gone into discussion with them about a partnership?
We have. When we last approached them, they weren't interested. So do we, I mean, I'd love to, do we have a problem?
I don't know if people are just not used to being able to park at the Women's Club because it has been private for so long. I don't know, what do y'all think?
I still hear from people who didn't know they could. Every now and again, I'll hear from somebody who'll say, "Oh, I
Some
can."
people just don't want to walk across the bridge. I mean, let's be honest. They just don't want to park over there and have to walk over. It's a matter of choice.
Some people can't walk that far, too. That bridge is hard if you're over a certain age.
Somebody explained it to me. The one time I wanted to go use the Women's Club, they had an event there, so I don't go back.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's a communication avenue that we could pursue so people are more aware of when it's open and, as importantly, when it's not. But people are creatures of habit, and if it's closed a couple of times,
Yeah.
they don't think to go back over there, especially since, as you said, the bulk of the activities on the other side of the tracks. The second part of that is, while those orange flags are just terrific tools to use when you're out there in the middle of the street and you got a truck bearing down on you, it does create a little intimidation factor. Even if you suggested people to go down to the corner and cross or whatever and guide them a little bit more where it's safer to cross, because I'll tell you, you take one look at that, and some of the parents with their kids, they're not going to cross that, and so they're not going to go over there unless they absolutely positively have to. It's risky. Now I get it. The TAP grant will solve a lot of this stuff, but maybe there's some temporary fixes. I don't know what the other property owners that have parking, where they stand. I don't know if they have a competitive rate that maybe you could bring back to us and we could understand. Is there opportunity? But since most of it's on the other side, would people walk across to the other side to use it? That's
what I wonder. Yes.
When walking around downtown, for instance, right on Church Street, right next to the knit shop, you have a couple of parallel parking spaces. Okay. But behind that, going toward McDonald Street, where the Nibbins Price parking lot is, it's an open section, grass, and how much of that is town right-of-way? Could that be turned into more parallel parking?
I think Kurt may give a little snapshot of this, but one of the things that we'd like you a lot to look at is the possibility of that being either parallel parking that's constructed to be true parallel parking, or perhaps angled parking, because angled parking could potentially get more cars. That's a lower traffic area, unlike 16, where you could potentially have a backing movement there. So just an evaluation of what that could be, because you could pick up a fair number of extra spaces there.
And I think from going forward from that, if we have other right-of-ways in the downtown area that are similar, grass not being utilized at this point, but they are town right-of-ways, could we look at those also to put gravel, put pavement, put curb gutter, whatever we needed to do to create more parking spaces in the areas where there is the highest demand for them?
The other opportunity might exist with the church there on the north side of Maine is, I don't know if there's ever been any opportunity to sit down and explore that, but certainly there could be some benefit for the church.
As far as valet parking, if a business owner has something that an arrangement they have with somewhere else where they think that works for them, I personally don't see any. I'd encourage them to do that. If they want to set it up so they can move cars, if they need a couple spaces so they can move cars away from that area and into an area that's a little less traveled, that's them moving across the tracks versus people that are out there having a good time. Put it that way.
I would just observe that it's often said if you have a parking problem, you have a successful downtown. So I think we're approaching that point. And so that's a good thing in that there's been a number of businesses that have made investment in downtown, and it's very active, as Kurt noted, is on many weeknights that you would not think is really that active. It's very, very active. And then the events certainly are driving up a capacity crowd there as well. So that's an excellent problem to have.
Yeah, and the other interesting dynamic that occurred throughout all this is the creamery moved from one side to the other. Yeah. And they drive a lot of traffic.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
And what about the parking along 75 near Fox's Pizza? People are already parking there. I know it's designated as not parking there, but people are still doing it. Can we make those regular parking spaces?
So Matt Hubert would probably speak a little bit more to this, but I believe I have to look back at my emails so I could probably follow up with you. But the engineering division did not recommend, the town's engineering did not recommend that be parking to DOT just because of the speed limit there, because of the curve in the road. The town and just didn't think that would be a safe place for parking. So that's why the request was made to DOT for the signage, actually.
Okay, and what about that road that runs, I don't know the name of the road that runs next to Fox's?
So
What about some spaces on there?
Salem Street, I believe.
Salem? Okay.
So they're being utilized on a Friday, Saturday night already. They're not officially striped or anything like that, but the delivery drivers are using that as well as using the front striped area. So that's certainly something. I don't think it's going to be in the scope of ULI, but something we could look at longer term. But right now it's being used kind of one of those, it's over 100% because there's no parking spots there, but it's kind of working itself out. It's not really nice and neat and very attractive because of the way it's being just kind of haphazardly used, but that's something longer term we can look at, but haven't yet. I think that's one thing that, just to jump on what Kurt said, the engineering staff did take another look at that whole area in front of the mill after Emmett's opened to see utilization of the mill parking lot, utilization of the Mill on Main parking behind it, and then the crossing back and forth, because there's really not a good place right there to cross. And so if you think about the two actual parking lots associated with the two businesses north and south of 75, if somebody gets out of their car on 75, they're going to have to go either across the street and jump a ditch to get to the northern side, or they're kind of wading through landscaping currently to get down to Emmett's, or they're running in to get a pizza. And so the majority right now are just either picking up a pizza or it's the delivery guys picking up pizza. So it doesn't appear that it's long-term parking for the mill or whatever, but it is signed that they shouldn't be parking there.
I would just point out this downtown parking strategy is on the Main Street Advisory Board's work plan, so this may be something that they come back with at a later date as well, just with ideas.
And their next meeting is?
Their next meeting is Monday, this coming Monday.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other questions?
While Kurt's still up, if he could just give a snapshot, because I mentioned ULI, but the latest information that we have, and just provide that to the board too.
Sure. So ULI, they are scheduled for October 1st and 2nd, and they're going to be, so it's about a day and a half that they're going to spend, and they're going to be looking specifically at creating a roadmap for downtown in terms of the town-owned parcels, and then making sure that those interface and make sense with any private development that might happen around the periphery. So we're talking about the Niven Price building, the corner gravel lot, but also taking into context the need for our downtown park, and we have a Parks and Recs annex building down there as well, and just kind of looking at everything holistically, but trying to come away with what's the best use and long-term for our downtown parcels. And to do that, the first day, Monday, October 1st, it's from about 2 to 5, they will be reviewing, they'll be doing a site tour, basically, and we'll be kind of showing them everything on the ground. We'll be providing them information in advance in terms of zoning and market studies and existing area plans and that sort of thing, so they'll be familiar with it. And then the second day is the big day, where in the morning they'll spend a lot of time doing stakeholder interviews. So they're gonna interview 20 stakeholders in the morning, and then they'll actually go into a closed session from about 12 till 5, and then present their findings in the evening. And then ultimately come back with a formal report after that, in a couple weeks after that. So we're excited about it. So more details to come, but I think that right now they're putting together the panel based on the Waxhaw's context. So we're not. We're still waiting to hear the full makeup of their team.
Any questions? Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you.
Good luck over the next few weeks.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Just a couple brief items, and we'll wrap up. But a note is that tomorrow evening at CRTPO, there is an item on the agenda for an additional, or an award to the town of Waxhaw for $1.8 million for the Kensington Drive project. So that is a significant accomplishment, because that road is a town-owned road and was not federally eligible for funding earlier this year. So it's moved from not being on the federal funded list to being on the state critically important or regionally important list, and now being moved into a category to receive $1.8 million. So that does get voted on tomorrow night. Hopefully that will go well. The Gray Byram signal and turn lane projects is on track. That's a construction in the 2019 year, but as far as we know, we've interacted with DOT on that, and that continues to move forward. And then the only other thing is that there's some infrastructure projects that we didn't talk about tonight that are related to parks. So we'll have those on the next meeting, and Dina will give updates on those particular projects. That's pretty much all we had to cover tonight. There is some opportunity at the next meeting to talk about UDO. It kind of fits into that category. That topic may be big enough that we want to break it out on its own session, on a separate night or a separate work session. So we'll work on trying to come up with a recommendation for that, but it may be that that's something large enough. The board, this board has not had really a kind of a beginning to end, why are we redoing the UDO? So I think the context of that before a draft is handed out might be good, and take questions and go through what that looks like. So we'll work on that coming work session on the 31st, but it may be that needs to have its own night or afternoon, late afternoon. So I think that's all we had.
Then with that, we'll adjourn the work session and get back here in about 21 minutes.